Well, welcome, GC family and friends. Thank you all for joining us today for this podcast.
Yeah, episode 2.
Episode 2, yeah. I think it went well last week. I know we enjoyed it.
Yeah, for sure.
Hopefully y'all are responding well to this, and I think this is going to be a pretty cool thing to get going with.
No doubt. No doubt.
Yeah, so today we're going to be discussing the second part of our series. We're going into generosity that tells a story. We're going to be hearing a little bit more from Paul about kind of what we talked about yesterday, and a little bit about what we can do with this kind of practically in our weeks. But as we get going, we had an event yesterday at GC called the Ministry Fair that our very own Jim Beasley led, did an awesome job at it. And we just want to tell you guys a little bit about that because it was a pretty cool experience. So the Ministry Fair, this was an event where we had a bunch of our community partners here at GC got together. Do you recall how many community partners did we have there?
Yeah, I don't know the exact number of community partners, but we had 27 total tables. So that was internal, kind of some internal ministries, and then our community partners, and then even beyond that, we had, I think, a couple of our mission partners as well. And so
awesome.
I think at least a dozen of them were community partners that are helping to serve here in Forsyth County, make this a better place to live for everybody that's here.
Yeah, it was a really cool time. So we were out in the parking lots, and we just spent some time going around meeting with these community partners, mission partners, GC ministries, kind of hearing about some of the work that they're doing and how we can get involved, how we can volunteer for some of these groups. So hopefully a lot of y'all were there for that and were able to find maybe a ministry that you can get plugged in with. But if you were not able to be there, I do want to encourage you, go to our website. All of our community partners, we've got information about them online, and there's still time for you to get plugged in with one of those ministries. We'd just love for you to do that.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I think, I've been encouraged already to hear several stories, received several emails this morning about people who have been waiting for this opportunity really to connect. And it's really coming off the heels of this very strange season we've been in with COVID. Where service, togetherness, all of that has been so limited. I think just the timing of this event was really good. Even blessed with kind of beautiful weather for being in November. Although it was a little chilly, it was sunny, beautiful, and just really enjoyed getting to watch people make those connections, like you said. Yeah,
we love it. It's such a great way to connect with this series, with what's going on here, and finding some ways to be generous. Be generous in your time, in your money, and supporting some of these organizations. We love it.
Yeah, agreed.
So with that in mind, Paul, why don't you tell us a little bit about yesterday? We're in part 2 of our series, Generosity That Tells a Story.
Yes.
Why don't you tell us just a little bit about what was that about? Where did we go with that message? Just give us a little bit of the main idea.
So yesterday began kind of with this, with laying out several scenarios in which we as human beings, as we grow and develop, learn that life is not, we learn that life is not just all about me, in a sense, and that's kind of the way we can say it. And started by kind of showing a picture of these two young kids playing with toys, and you had that moment. I had that moment as a parent where I've watched my children all go through this moment of realization where they have a toy, and it's normally in that 2 to 3 year old age that they really, really like, and a friend comes over, and of course the friend likes the toy as well, and they have that decision to make in that moment. Am I going to be focused on this toy is mine, or am I going to choose to share this toy? And if life is all about me and life is all about what I want, then no, the toy's mine. But then that also makes it very difficult for me to have relationship if I'm saying, no, this is all about me and this is mine, and I don't share and I don't say, no, this is about us. Then it makes relationship really difficult. And so went through a number of different phases, scenarios in which we learned that to be the case, whether that be, with your first friend, your first real kind of significant other relationship, maybe a job, maybe moving into marriage, and then especially, where I've had to really learn that is for myself as a dad, that life is not just all about me. As I hold this child, all 3 of my children, that moment, the first moment you hold them where you realize, here is this life that is dependent upon me, that I'm responsible for. And if I make this all about me, there's no way I can care well for this child, And so there are these moments in life, I think, where we learn life is not all about me.
I really like how you articulated that too in the message, because I think a lot of times we tend to think, a lot of us tend to think, at least I tend to think, oh, I'm pretty selfless. Like, I'm not self-centered. And we think that because that is so core to following Jesus. So we think that, oh, if we're Christians, we're not really self-centered. But then when you really start to reflect on it, when you look at your bank statement, when you look at how you spent your time in the week, when you kind of start to look at the facts of it, a lot of times it can kind of get exposed of,
I think you're right.
There's a lot of ways that I have been pretty self-centered.
Yeah.
I know I was thinking about that as I was listening to your message of just thinking about ways that, I don't really think I'm self-centered until I look at how much I spent on coffee on my bank statement, and it can call you out a little bit.
There you go. Yeah, I think there are those moments in life, and it can be some of those phases. It can be, I think, like you said, looking at a bank statement. There are a whole bunch of different ways that every now and then we start to think, boy, I'm really making progress on this. Yeah. There's that reality check, that wake-up moment that says, boy, there's still a long way to go. Yeah. And that's not to deny the progress. That's just to embrace what still lies ahead, to become more like Christ. And really, that's what the passage that we looked at yesterday talked all about. It's that we're supposed to be like Jesus in this. So
we were in Philippians chapter 2, going from verse 1 through 8. So let me just read that real quick. I'm reading from the New Living Translation. And so Paul writing here says, "Is there any encouragement from belonging to Christ? Any comfort from his love? Any fellowship together in the Spirit? Are your hearts tender and compassionate? Then make me truly happy by agreeing wholeheartedly with each other, loving one another, and working together with one mind and purpose. Don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. Don't look out for only your own interests, but take interest in others too. You must have the same attitude that Christ Jesus had. Though he was God, he did not think of equality with God as something to cling to. Instead, he gave up his divine privileges. He took the humble position of a slave. He was born as a human being, and when he appeared in human form, he humbled himself in obedience to God. He died a criminal's death on the cross."
Yeah, I mean, just even sitting here again contemplating those words after looking at those words all last week and then even getting to share them yesterday, I'm just struck again by the call to be like Christ and the examples that Paul gives, the way that Jesus left behind everything he had, basically glory, left behind glory to take on human form, to then become a servant, to then make the ultimate sacrifice, give his life, even in a very cruel and torturous way. And then there's this call for us to live that way. It's a heavy call. I talked yesterday about the fact, the NIV basically says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Do nothing. Like, that's the target, that's the goal for us, to live that way, to where we do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. And, in that comes this realization too, that was accurate about Jesus. Jesus did nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, and we're supposed to live like him, which then creates this real rub because, the standard that Paul is calling us to, we see in ourselves these negative behaviors and attitudes that we still embody.
Yeah.
But we're being called to something so much better.
Yeah.
I think that's powerful.
Yeah, that is. So one of the things you talked about in the message yesterday was kind of this idea of behavior replacement, of replacing a negative behavior or attitude with a positive one. So as we're thinking about replacing pride and self-centeredness with humility, so explain to us, why is that important? I mean, even tapping into a little bit of your counseling background, why is that important to have that kind of behavior replacement mindset?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, I had several people want to talk a little bit more about that yesterday. There's this reality that oftentimes when, especially in a counseling relationship, so I'm engaging with somebody and there's a struggle going on in life, a negative behavior, a negative attitude or thought even that they embrace, it's kind of wild. If you try to get somebody to not do something or to think about not doing something or to think about having a different attitude or a different belief, oftentimes the more you think about something, even a negative thing, the more you're just going to end up doing that same negative thing. So if all you're thinking to yourself is, I need to not be selfish, that often doesn't win the battle. And so in counseling, we know that to be true. What's amazing to me about the Apostle Paul is he understood that well, or through the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, he's able to convey that reality well. So often, and in this passage is true, he says, listen, here's the negative behavior, thought, or attitude. Here's the way you then turn around and replace that and make something new. So take whatever was negative, replace it with something positive. Take whatever is your flesh, replace it with something spiritual that is Jesus. Okay, so in this case, Paul is saying, what I want you to do, so selfishness is your go-to, right? So ambition, selfish ambition, vain conceit are your go-to, but then Paul says, rather in humility, consider others or value others more than you value yourself. Consider others better than yourself in a sense. So he's saying, okay, what you used to do is think just about yourself. Now I want you to value others more highly than you value yourself. Okay, so we're taking this one attitude, replacing it with another much better attitude. And as I start to think not about not being selfish, but start to think about how can I value others, something starts to happen. Again, so if I just focus on that negative behavior over and over again, that negative thought over and over again, I'm likely to actually do that thing because I'm spending so much time focusing on it. So Paul says instead, focus on this, or do this, or change this attitude, embrace this new attitude. So it's powerful in transforming in a counseling relationship. It's also powerful in transforming as we're trying to become disciples of Jesus, to say, here's this behavior and attitude that is me, that is rooted in my flesh. But what was the attitude and behavior that Jesus embraced that was rooted in the Spirit? Okay, now I want to focus on that. I want to give all my energy toward focusing on that. And it's amazing when we do that, as opposed to just focusing on the negative, how transformation and change really can come about.
Yeah. So I guess, like, practically speaking, it looks more like focusing on being humble, on taking on Jesus' mindset, not focusing on not being selfish.
Correct. No, that's 100% right. And so, instead of only thinking about myself, I now start to think about others. Instead of being selfish, I start to think about being selfless. And there's so many places where this can be true in life, and there's so many probably really practical applications of that as well. You may actually find a very specific application of that in saying, maybe here's what I do on a Saturday, and oftentimes on a Saturday I'm focusing only on myself, or I'm focusing primarily on myself. How could I actually take that and now give specific time to focusing on others on this Saturday? Even people, in counseling, we find it's really wild. Oftentimes when people are truly depressed, now there's clinical depression and sometimes medication is needed for that, but sometimes it's just the ongoing inward thought process that we have that leads to, or at least furthers and fosters depression within us. And so if you can get somebody not thinking about how bad things are inside of them, but start focusing on doing something good for somebody else, sometimes that doing something good and finding meaning and purpose in that can actually turn around an inward struggle because of an outward new behavior.
That's good.
And so again, it's replacing that, not just staying stuck on this old thing, but replacing that with something new. To just take out the old thing even creates a vacuum. And sometimes something worse can come and fill that vacuum when you try to move something. We see that especially true with addictive behaviors as well. And the reality is, for many of us, sin, negative thoughts, attitudes that are not pleasing to God or that are not godly are part of who we are, almost like an addiction to some degree. We got to replace those with something better. And so again, Paul challenges us to be like Jesus in the way we think about serving others and embracing an attitude of self-sacrifice for the sake of others. So instead of self-indulgence, I'm embracing self-sacrifice. So instead of selfishness, I'm embracing selflessness. So instead of pride, I'm embracing humility. So now I start to think, how can I be these things, as opposed to just thinking about how can I not be these anymore.
I love that. So we're getting just really, really practical with it. Would you give us just like one kind of challenge, one step that we could take this week? And kind of, I think you already alluded to a lot of that, but of what could that look like? So as we're turning off this podcast, going back out into our weeks, what's one thing we could start doing today to be taking on that Christ-like mindset?
Yeah, so I was really struck yesterday by, again, by the questions about, this idea of behavior or thought or attitude replacement. But then I was also struck by how many folks came and had a conversation with me about, this idea about recognizing that when they are in a conversation with somebody else, how often they probably do dominate that conversation with things that are about me. And so maybe a real practical way, just a quick application as you go out into this week, even just in conversation, because I guarantee embracing that one thing will move you to learn more about somebody else, which will expose maybe a need that they have and will give you an opportunity to then fill that need where you will have made it about them and not about you. So where does that start? So instead of in a conversation with someone, whether it's somebody you're meeting for the first time, somebody you know as an acquaintance, even a friend, somebody that you're connected with, do the best you can to focus that conversation to their needs, what's happening in their life, as opposed to allowing it to be all about you. I talked about my friend Dave yesterday and how, he's just an absolute master at this, and I don't know if it's something that he's developed over time or it's just the way he is, but I know in his example I want to be more like him. So instead of, I'm thankful when people ask me about me. I love the chance to tell them about what's going on in my life, to share my burdens. That's part of what it means to walk this life as the family of God. But I know I need to pursue that with others, to be asking the question, how are you doing? And then to listen and follow what comes next out of that. Again, as we talked about last week, we got to listen to the Spirit. So as we're listening to the Spirit, how can I then embrace an attitude of self-sacrifice and serving someone else, because now I've become aware of what's happening in their life where I can now maybe meet one of their needs.
That's really good. I love that example too. I thought it was such a helpful kind of way to see that in our lives that you gave in the message. And even just as we think about the conversations that you regularly have in our own lives, and just kind of auditing ourselves a little bit and gaining in some self-awareness to see where, sometimes we do make that conversation all about ourselves. And I think that's such a good, practical little way to start taking on that Christ-like mindset. I love that.
Yeah, and let me say too, you may, especially if you're the kind of person that, especially for extroverts, sometimes, and I'm somewhat extroverted, the conversation is often about us. It is. We find a way to, we like to tell stories, we like to share what's going on in our lives, we like to entertain, and sometimes that's about us. We're the center of that. And so what you may find in that really exposes how difficult this is, you may find that there's a struggle in that initially to really turn that corner, make the conversation about someone else. But I just challenge you to pursue through that struggle. Some of you, this may come more naturally for, but whether it's difficult or whether it's easy, I guarantee you the information, what you're going to learn about someone else, and the knowledge that then gives you to do something for them that makes an impact upon them, I can guarantee you it's just going to be entirely worth it.
Awesome. Love that. Well, thank you, Paul. Thanks for that challenge.
Thanks,
that's awesome. Well, as we close today, I just want to give just a couple of housekeeping notes kind of for y'all. And we're really enjoying doing this. It's really great. We loved this last week, and kind of we're in an experimental phase with this podcast of seeing how this works, of how it's received. So I just want to ask you, if you're enjoying this, would you let us know? Either drop a comment on the video, or just, you can shoot either of us a text, reach out, just let us know what you're enjoying about it. If there's a question that you ever have that you'd love us to talk about, feel free to reach out with that as well. And just kind of let us know how this is going. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can subscribe to that video. That'd be fantastic as well. But we'd love to just hear from you and hear how this is going. Just to let you know too, we are hoping to have an audio version of this. We're calling it a podcast. We know it's mainly on video right now, but we are working on that. So hopefully we'll have a podcast channel up at some point, and we'll get with y'all on that soon. But we're enjoying it. So
yeah, absolutely. God bless you guys, and we absolutely look forward to continuing this conversation.
Fantastic. Thank y'all for joining us.